listening to the Nerdy Reads podcast, a hipster goblin media production.
Welcome to the Nerdy Reads podcast. It's time for a little bit of comic book action. As always, it's me, I am Lockman, and I'm joined by my boy, Dylan. What's up, dude?
Not much, Blake. I'm excited, man. We got a really awesome story, a really pretty big event in Marvel history that I've never experienced before, and this is my first time really diving into it, and you're well-versed on this event. So, yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it, man.
Yeah, so backstory for me, I was out of comics for a while, and I decided to get back into comics years ago. I walked into a local comic book store and I walked up to the guy behind the register and I said, "Hey man, I haven't bought comics in like 5 years. What's going on in comics? Like, where can I start?" He's like, "What do you like?" I was like, "I like Marvel." He's like, "Here, I got something for you." And he gave me issue 1 and issue 2 of Civil War because issue 2 had just come out. And I went home and read those and I was back in comics. So this series is responsible for me getting back in comics. I will argue that it's probably one of the greatest crossover, probably if not the greatest crossover for me personally, but in Marvel comic book continuity. I love everything about this. It's awesome. So we're only covering, so here at Nerdy Reads podcast, we cover anything cover to cover, nerdy stuff. Comic books fall right in that category. And we're doing Civil War. If we haven't said that enough yet, we're doing Civil War. We're doing the 7 issues, the main 7 issues. I know there are a million other issues. I have every single one of them. But we're only, maybe I can dive into some of that as we dig through this, like some of the other little things that happen. But the main 7's what we're covering. We're using our Marvel Unlimited app to kind of drop into the comics and give some highlights and talk about some things. So it's, I don't know how many times reading this for me. This is Dylan's first time through. I love that perspective. It's a brand new comic book for you. A piece of my heart that I'm reading through again for me. So, all right. So we're going to go through issue 1. So welcome. We're glad you're here. If you have comments about the stuff, feel free to hit it up in the Discord. And, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Civil War as well. Maybe we'll make a little tab just for Civil War. The new Captain America movie is out. What better time than to jump into what I think is one of the greatest Captain America books of all time. I call it a Captain America book. He's just one of the main characters, Civil War. All right, so let's just jump right into it. We're here, man. It's issue 1. Dylan, first thoughts. You never read this. You busted into Civil War, and how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not reading this before, but I am pretty big on the MCU, so I kind of got the gist of the whole idea behind the story, I guess, from the MCU, but it's obviously a lot different in the comics, especially, I mean, just even in the beginning, whenever it starts out, like, I was a little confused because it was like superheroes on a reality TV show. I was like, this is kind of weird, but okay, I'll roll with it.
Right.
And, but, then they caused that huge explosion, and, that's what really kind of, like, they say it multiple times throughout the first issue, the straw that broke the camel's back, that really kind of called into question, do the superheroes need to have some sort of just like restrictions on what they can do, what they can't do, because they're obviously, causing destruction and that are, leaving innocent people, they're affecting innocent people that maybe are just bystanders in the process of obviously trying to save people who are in other circumstances that are actually getting, potentially hurt, but they're hurting people in the process. So it's like kind of, I don't know. I definitely feel like it's an interesting, there are definitely pros and cons to each side. Firsthand, like I don't really, obviously, I was trying to be controversial. I said Tony was right because I feel like from a logistical standpoint, it does make sense, making sure that there is some sort of checks and balance system for the superheroes, making sure, somebody doesn't get power hungry and go off, doing whatever they want to do. And because, I mean, whenever you have superhero power, or you have superpowers, I'm sure you get tempted pretty often to maybe do something you probably shouldn't do. So it really takes a really strong character, not just like character in a comic book, but like character as a person to
Like
really
Cap
be
has.
a hero. Yeah, just like Cap. I mean, yeah, that's very valid.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, it is completely understandable of like, having to work for the government and the government controlling what you do, basically just being a pawn for them and doing their bidding rather than,
Yeah.
what is always right. Having that freedom to actually do the right thing versus if you're under government control, then you kind of just do whatever they say. And so, like, I definitely see pros and cons to both sides for sure. I just, I'm just going to say Team Iron Man just to be controversial, though.
Hey, it's cool, man. It's a good
For the sake
perspective
of the
to have.
argument.
That's right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the comic itself. So you will, I'm going to bring us up here and get us into the comic. And all right. So as you can see here on the cover, right when you start off, I love this. Whose side are you on? Which Dylan just went into some dialogue about. The comic challenges you right off the bat. Like, whose side are you on? It's like, whose side am I on in the Civil War? What's going on in the Civil War? The Marvel Universe is changing. In the wake of a tragedy, Capitol Hill proposes the Superhero Registration Act, requiring all costume heroes to unmask themselves before the government. Divided, the nation's greatest champions must each decide how to react, a decision that will alter the course of their lives forever, right? So that's your intro to Civil War. As Dylan said, they're doing like a reality TV show, and these bunch of C-rank superheroes go and try to take down some supervillains, and it doesn't work out well. Nitro gets smashed into a bus here, and after that, there's all these kids outside playing. It's, Connecticut. Everybody's just outside, and then Nitro says, now you're playing with the big boys, and boom, and he literally vaporizes like several blocks of people, tons of children. It's a horrible tragedy. This panel right here is the superheroes show up. This is the Civil War has not happened yet. This is what leads up to it, right? Part 1 of 7. I love underneath Cap, the American flag is torched. If you like look under his feet. There's just a lot going on here. Thing and Luke Cage picking up a piece of a wall. There's just like all the heroes have shown up to try to like help. There's like skeletons on the ground. I mean, it's a horrible situation. You see the firefighters performing CPR on someone. It's a really grim. It's a horrible tragedy. Much like we know tragedies that happen in the news and in the real world. Marvel really try to tap into that energy and kind of, even though it's a fantastical superhero comic, they try to bring a little bit of reality, into it. And I think that's what makes this story kind of hit at the core, I did think it's a cool, quick shout out to the X-Men that happens in their backyard and they just show up and they're helping.
Yeah, I will say that was one thing I was not expecting was the X-Men being involved. Like, I obviously knew this was a pretty big event, but like I didn't know to what extent, like who all exactly was involved. And I guess it pretty much, involves every single character essentially. That's depending on whichever time. I'm assuming this was 616, so I'm assuming this is probably like pretty much every Marvel character is most likely in this universe.
Yeah,
if I had to guess.
absolutely.
So like, I guess I didn't really realize to what extent that was. And then also going back to the kind of what you were talking about it, kind of being a more relative story, like something you can kind of relate to and more grounded. I've been doing like some deep dives and kind of listening to Stan Lee's original ideas whenever he kind of brought to Marvel. And he was really trying to hone in on that, like, so he kind of talked about how before he started doing mostly around like the Fantastic Four time, whenever he started coming up with those. But around that time, it was really just superhero takes down bad guy, essentially, like almost every comic, like the old like Batman comics or whatever, and like just stuff like that. And so Stan tried to basically kind of reinvent that and make them have like real world problems essentially. And I think that played a lot into like Peter Parker and Spider-Man, like how like the tragedy of Peter Parker, I guess, but having to split between his like reality versus being a hero and like all that stuff. And I think that is probably one thing that I've noticed reading into Marvel comics is like how just relatable they are.
Yeah.
It's definitely pretty cool, especially listening to Stan Lee talking about kind of his perspective and all that stuff on everything. But
yeah, you can feel that in their vibe, and this series especially. But yeah, that is it definitely has like the trademark of like a Marvel comic that really ties into that. You nailed it with Spider-Man. I mean, he's the hero that's like the blueprint for that. You know, this kid had to worry about college or high school, girls, dates, his aunt not being able to pay the bills. Oh, and by the way, he's a superhero, you know? And so, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Civil War hits in that, as they go through, it kind of showing you what's going on around society, right? Like on CNN, they're talking about it. Churches around at the funerals are talking, you know, at the funeral, they're talking about it. Tony Stark, this is kind of a key moment here. Tony Stark goes to the funeral for like a lot of the people who were lost in the tragedy. And this lady straight spits in his face, calls him a filthy piece of crap, basically says like, hey, my son's blood is on your hands because you and the Avengers, you're the new Warriors, you're reckless. And, you know, Tony tries to be like, hey, the new Warriors have nothing to do with us. But she's like, well, you fund everything. You know, you fund the Avengers. You know, so she really lays into him. And I think this is like a key point in his character development for this story that really gets Tony thinking like, man, we do need to do something about this. You know, it's too much. As you go through, there's like a few things that happen, like Human Torch. There's our boy Human Torch who just did a Fantastic Four episode. There he is, you know.
He's friggin' bodied. He's jumped.
He's beat up by the people at the bar. They cracked him over there. Yeah. It's like the public has turned on the superheroes, and it just took one crazy event. And now even the public is like, yeah, these superhero reform, you know. So all the heroes gather together. They're all talking about, you know, what's going on at the Baxter Building, Fantastic Four. As they're talking about it, they're trying to figure out like, what's the consensus? Like, are we going to really become like because the Superhero Registration Act is basically like, hey, you can still be superheroes, but you need to sign up, become registered with the government, expose your secret identities. You'll get paid, you'll get pensions. And most of the superheroes, as they're talking, they're like, I don't know about this. Right. I really like the scene here, and I left it up on the panel because Sam, the current Captain America, Falcon in this is like, you know, I can't believe I'm hearing this. The masquerade tradition, we can't just let them turn us into super cops, you know? And they're kind of arguing, and like all the heroes are going back and forth on this. And Tony kind of becomes the like voice. Spider-Man shows up and is like, hey, I can't show off my secret identity. And Sue Storm's like, well, hey, we've had our identities exposed forever. It's not really that big of a deal, Spider-Man, you know? And he had a really good point. He's like, yeah, not until the day I come home and find my wife impaled on an octopus arm, or the woman who raised me begging for her life. Like, if my enemies find out who I am, my whole family is at risk.
I mean, you know? to kind of counteract, like, obviously, I know that said that I'm kind of leaning towards the Iron Man side, but to counteract Sue's argument, the Fantastic Four, all the people they care about are superheroes.
Exactly. They all have superpowers. They protect themselves.
So
your brother can catch it. Well, he didn't protect himself very good outside that bar, though.
Well,
Boy got beat up. But yes, you were right. Absolutely.
Extent, you know, he can protect himself a lot more than, you know, Aunt May or whoever can, you know, for Peter. So
so
the Fantastic Four exposing themselves versus Peter exposing himself.
Right.
You know,
different.
There's very different situations.
So when I got this comic, I'll be really honest. Like, all right, I loved comics at the time. I'd read tons of them. I was mainly an X-Men comic fan, and I read a lot of Spider-Man growing up. This was my first branch into learning about other characters like Captain America. I mean, I knew about them, but like I call this a Captain America, like a great Captain America story, because you get who Steve Rogers is throughout this whole series, and it's so good. This is one of my favorite Captain America moments of any comic book or movie or anything. He's on the SHIELD helicarrier while the rest of them are talking. He's 6 miles above New York. He meets with Commander Hill and SHIELD, and she's like, hey, I heard your friends are all gathered up. You think they're going to go for it? He's like, that's not really my job to judge that. And she's like, you know, come on, Rogers, you know, cut the crap. And, you know, she goes into that, and she's like the acting head of SHIELD. And, Cap kind of hits her with like, this is going to split us right down the middle. You're going to have a war between the superheroes because we're going to fall on different sides for this. And so that the other agents are talking, and then they're like, they could be proper trained and paid for a living, are there going to be any rebels, Cap? Like they just kind of assume, I guess, that Cap is going to have their back on this. And he's like, yeah, I think a few, but the people who work in the streets like Daredevil and Luke Cage, like they're not going to want to give up their identities or whatever, and so she said, is it nobody that you can't handle? And that's where Cap, like where Tony had that breakthrough moment where that lady like spit in his face and he thought about like the kids. When this is a Cap's moment where she's like, is there any heroes you can't handle? And he's like, excuse me, and she's like, yeah, you heard me. Like, you're going to be the one to take them down, Cap, and he's like, forget about it. This is Cap. He sticks to his moral compass and his integrity, right? He's like, you're asking me to arrest people who risk their lives for the country every day of the week. She's like, and Commander Hill says, no, I'm asking you to obey the will of the people. And he like Cap gets hot, and they start arguing back and forth. And I love that all the soldiers like cock all their guns, like they're going to shoot Cap. And he tells them to put their guns down. He's like, guns down, weapons down, boys. And they kind of listen. And then she's like, stand your ground. And then they basically have this huge blowout. And he basically tells her like, no, he's not going to do it. And they argue back and forth, and the Cap just has to do what he has to do. And he throws down on the dudes, beats up the soldiers so he can get out. And I just love this scene of Cap fighting. This is very much like when they did the Civil War movie. And you remember Cap's in the elevator and he like fights all the dudes in the elevator. Is that Winter Soldier?
Yeah, I think that's actually Winter Soldier.
Yeah, but like the agents that are supposed to have his back, he like ends up fighting them. But like at the first time reading this, like I didn't really know a whole lot about Cap, and I was like, dude, Cap is the dude. He took down all those agents, and then dude can't even fly, but he just goes running outside. Like that shot right there is so good. Just running, jumps out of the helicarrier, and falling all the way down, ends up landing on a plane, and holds on with the shield, and he's like, go put her down, and that right there, dude, Cap, the man. And he gets away from Hill, so that Hill kind of pushed Cap to be anti-registration, because she intended that she wanted him to go take down his friends. And when you put a guy with a moral compass like Captain America and you say, no, you will obey the government and you will do what we say and you will hunt down your friends, you have pushed him, you've painted him into a corner. And now he's like, well, I guess it's time to rage against the machine, man. No, I'm not going to do that, And so that's kind of like issue 1, it brings up these points. Anytime you see the Watcher in a comic book, some real wild, like important stuff is going down. And the heroes even can see him. And so they know, like, Doctor Strange, is it Doctor Strange? I think his presence does not bode well, this is getting real. They go over through the protest, and then this is kind of it, Captain America or Iron Man, is pro registration. You've got Reed Richards in his corner, Yellow Jacket's there with him, and he's basically like, hey, push the registration as planned. You can just leave Captain America to us. And so the teams are starting to split. The heroes are divided, and you've got Iron Man and his team, and Cap's about to build his resistance team, and it's going to be the Civil War. So that's the first issue, to be continued. We're going to kind of do maybe, this is the kind of the kickoff. So we'll do this one. And then we plan to maybe do 2 issues at a time or something, but we're going to go through this Civil War series. Dylan, this is just issue 1, man. A lot of stuff just happened, as a first time reader. What stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, really just it's definitely a lot different, like comparing it to like the MCU. Kind of like I said before, there's obviously a lot more people that are involved with this specifically, which is kind of cool because I definitely think there are a lot of other maybe heroes that weren't in the MCU that will probably have to be forced to pick a side in this, and I'm interested to see who picks what. Obviously, more like kind of like what they said in the comic, like Cap said, the more street level people, may not really go for it versus maybe some of the more established people might be more so willing to kind of cooperate. And so I think that'll probably be one of the biggest things for me is like seeing other characters outside of just who was in the MCU, make that decision on which side of this they're going to be on. Obviously, Reed Richards being on working with Tony, like I know you kind of touched on that a little bit in the previous episode because you're not the biggest fan of Reed Richards because of this.
Right.
But I definitely think them two working like two of the smartest people in the friggin' universe, like working together, I think that can definitely lead to some pretty cool stuff that they could be potentially cooking up. And then, of course, like the people who I'm interested in who else chooses to join Cap's resistance team. I know already from kind of diving a little bit into issue 2, a little bit ahead, that Sue definitely seems like she's leaning more towards disagreeing with Reed, which I definitely think that'll be interesting to explore.
Yeah, it's a neat dynamic for sure.
So yeah, because I definitely feel like there's going to be a lot of relationships like that people that are close, they're going to be winding up on separate sides. So I'm excited. I'm definitely I'm hyped for continuing this series because it's already pretty good. So
yeah, man, for sure. Issue 1 really hooked me, and I said I think issue 2 had just come out when I got introduced to it. So issue 2, I don't want to let it go yet. We'll talk about it next time, but has a really awesome cliffhanger, and that was something that hooked me. I would just say Civil War, hold on, man. It's you remember when this came out, the MCU was not, I don't when did Iron Man come out? 2007?
Iron Man came out in 2008. So I think this was right after this.
Right after this Iron Man came out. So 2006, 2007, this series came out. So
do you know what was coming out in 2007? Spider-Man 3.
Oh yeah.
Toby Phillips.
All right, so hey, that's Civil War issue 1. Hope you've enjoyed. We're gonna do it again if it's been a trip down memory lane for you. Hey, here we are, Team Cap, Team Tony. Which team do you fall on? Join us next time. We're gonna jump into it and be on the lookout. We're gonna see a lot of content start popping out from these comic book boys that were once in the Optic Blast broadcast, coming out from Nerdy Reads podcast. So we're gonna talk about the new Cap movie. I put out a little spoiler-free trailer out there, or a spoiler-free review. But we're gonna do like an actual review where we go into it. So yeah, just stay tuned. There's a lot more coming your way.